The dusty streets of St. Elmo, Colorado held their breath under the scorching August sun of 1883, and Benjamin Wade was about to make the worst mistake of his entire 26 years on this earth. He had ridden hard from Denver, his chestnut mare exhausted and his own bones aching from 3 days on the trail. The silver strike that had brought him to this particular mountain town was nothing more than rumor and hope, but Benjamin Wade had always been a man willing to chase both. His leather saddlebags carried everything he owned, which was not much, and his pockets jingled with the last of his wages from working the cattle drives through Wyoming. The town appeared before him like a mirage, buildings clustered together, in defiance of the harsh wilderness that surrounded them on all sides. St. Elmo sat at nearly 10,000 feet, where the air was thin and the summers brief. Pine trees crowded the mountainsides, and the remnants of winter snow still clung to the highest peaks visible in the distance. The main street was rutted and worn, lined with wooden structures that looked hastily built but stubbornly permanent. A general store, a blacksmith, a boarding house, and yes, there at the far end, a saloon with painted red trim and a sign that read the Silver Queen. Benjamin dismounted outside the general store, his legs nearly buckling from the long ride. He tied his mare to the hitching post and stretched, feeling every vertebra in his spine pop and settle. A woman emerged from the store at that exact moment, her arms laden with packages wrapped in brown paper and string. She wore a deep blue dress that was modest and well-made, with lace at the collar and cuffs. Her dark auburn hair was pinned up beneath a small hat, and her face was flushed from the heat and the exertion of carrying her parcels. This was where Benjamin Wade's exhaustion, his assumptions, and his profound stupidity collided. She was coming from the direction of the saloon, or so it seemed to his tired eyes. The packages looked like they might contain fabric or fripperies, the sort of things he imagined saloon girls might purchase. Her dress, while modest, had a richness to it that his weary mind associated with women who worked in such establishments. And there was something about the way she moved, with confidence and purpose, that made him think she was comfortable in this rough town. Benjamin tipped his hat in what he considered a friendly, knowing gesture. He added a wink for good measure. "Afternoon, miss," he said, his voice carrying a tone that suggested familiarity, almost intimacy. "You are looking particularly fine today. Business must be good at the Silver Queen." The words hung in the air between them like gunsmoke. The woman stopped dead in her tracks. The color drained from her face, then rushed back twice as fierce. Her green eyes, which had been merely glancing at him in passing, now locked onto his face with an intensity that made him take an involuntary step backward. "I beg your pardon." Her voice was low, controlled, and absolutely frigid. Benjamin felt the first stirrings of unease. "I just meant, coming from the saloon and all, you must be one of the girls who works there. No offense intended, miss. I am sure you are very good at what you do." If looks could kill, Benjamin Wade would have been laid out in the street. The woman's jaw clenched so hard he could see the muscle jump. She took a step toward him, and he noticed that several people on the street had stopped to watch the unfolding scene. "I," she said, biting off each word with precision, "am Amelia Foster. I am the school teacher of this town. I have just come from visiting Mrs. Henderson, who is recovering from a difficult childbirth, and I brought her some supplies from the store. I have never in my entire life set foot inside the Silver Queen, nor would I ever have reason to do so." The packages slipped slightly in her arms, and Benjamin instinctively reached out to help steady them. She jerked away from him as though he were a rattlesnake. "Do not touch me. Do not speak to me. And if you have any sense whatsoever, You will stay far, far away from me, you ignorant, presumptuous, offensive excuse for a man." She swept past him with the dignity of a queen, her skirts swirling in the dust. Benjamin stood frozen, his hat still in his hand, his mouth hanging open like a landed fish. The onlookers began to murmur among themselves, and he caught snatches of their conversation. "That is the new drifter," insulted Miss Foster right on the main street. "Poor fool does not know what he has done. She will never forgive him for that." Benjamin turned to the nearest person, an older man with a tobacco-stained beard who was leaning against the storefront. "I truly thought she was a saloon girl," he said weakly. The man spat into the dirt. "Miss Amelia Foster came here 2 years ago from Boston. She is the only teacher we have had who stayed longer than 6 months. She teaches every child in this town, from the miner's brats to the mayor's daughter. She runs the Sunday school, organizes the church socials, and nursed half the town through pneumonia last winter. She is the most respected woman in St. Elmo." Benjamin felt his stomach drop somewhere into the vicinity of his boots. "I need to apologize." "You can try," the man said with a shrug. "But Miss Foster has a memory like an elephant and a temper like dynamite when she is wronged. Good luck, son." Benjamin did try. He walked directly to the boarding house where he learned Miss Foster lived, climbed the steps, and knocked on the door. The landlady, a formidable woman named Mrs. Kowalski, answered with her arms crossed over her ample bosom. "You are the fool who insulted Miss Foster." "Yes, madam. I need to speak with her and apologize properly. She does not wish to see you. She has specifically requested that if you came calling, I was to send you away with instructions that you are not welcome here. Not now, not ever. Please, I did not mean any harm. I was tired from the trail and I made a terrible mistake." Mrs. Kowalski's expression did not soften one bit. "Miss Foster is a lady of impeccable character. You suggested she was a woman of ill repute in front of half the town. There is no apology that can undo that kind of insult. Now get off my porch before I get my broom." Benjamin retreated, his tail between his legs. He found lodging at the other boarding house in town, a less respectable establishment that catered mostly to minors. He stabled his mare and paid for a week's room and board, then spent the evening sitting in his small room, staring at the wall and replaying the interaction in his mind. He had never considered himself a bad man. Reckless, perhaps, quick to act and slow to think, certainly. But he had always prided himself on treating women with respect the way his mother had taught him before she passed. The fact that he had so thoroughly failed in that regard, and hurt someone innocent in the process, sat in his gut like a stone. The next morning, Benjamin went looking for work. St. Elmo was a mining town, and there was always need for strong backs and willing hands. He found employment quickly enough with a man named Patterson who ran a silver claim up in the mountains. The work was brutal, swinging a pickaxe in the thin mountain air, breathing rock dust, and hauling ore out of the narrow tunnels. But it paid decently, and it gave Benjamin time to think. He saw Amelia Foster from a distance several times that first week. She walked to the schoolhouse each morning, carrying a leather satchel filled with books and papers. She greeted people on the street with warmth and kindness. Children ran up to her to show her treasures they had found, flowers they had picked, and she always stopped to admire and praise them. Once, he happened to be walking on the same side of the street as her. When she saw him approaching, she crossed to the other side without hesitation, her chin held high and her eyes fixed straight ahead. That Sunday, Benjamin went to church. He was not a particularly religious man, but he had been raised to observe the Sabbath, and besides, he hoped he might find an opportunity to approach Miss Foster on neutral ground. The church was a simple white structure with a bell tower and plain wooden pews. Nearly everyone in town attended, packed together in the small space. Benjamin slipped into a back pew and immediately spotted Amelia in the front, sitting with several other women who appeared to be her friends. Her hair was particularly beautiful in the light streaming through the windows, and he noticed for the first time the graceful curve of her neck. The service was standard enough: hymns and prayers and a sermon about forgiveness that Benjamin felt was directed specifically at him, though the reverend could not possibly have known his situation. When the service ended, people lingered to chat and socialize. Benjamin worked up his courage and approached Amelia, who was discussing something with the reverend's wife. "Miss Foster, might I have a word?" She turned to him with ice in her eyes. "No, Mr. Wade, you may not. I just want to apologize properly." "You already apologized in your way through Mrs. Kowalski. Your apology is noted and rejected. Please leave me alone." The reverend's wife looked between them with interest, and Benjamin realized he was only making things worse by creating another scene. He nodded stiffly and walked away, feeling the eyes of the congregation on his back. 2 weeks passed. Benjamin worked the mine, ate his meals in solitude, and spent his free time trying to figure out how to make amends. He asked around town carefully about Miss Foster. He learned that she was 23 years old, had come west after both her parents died of influenza, and had chosen teaching as her profession because she believed in the power of education to change lives. She was known for her patience with difficult students, her creativity in making lessons engaging, and her willingness to provide extra tutoring to children who struggled. She also, according to the general store owner, had a fierce sense of justice and an inability to forget a wrong. "She is still angry about the time the mayor tried to cut her salary 2 years back," the store owner confided. "She stood up in a town meeting and gave him such a dressing down that he never tried it again. When Miss Foster sets her mind against something or someone, she does not waver." Benjamin was beginning to understand the magnitude of the challenge before him. His first real attempt at earning her forgiveness came on a Saturday afternoon in early September. He had noticed that the schoolhouse needed repairs. Several of the window frames were rotting, the steps were loose, and the roof had a section where the shingles were missing. He gathered supplies, borrowed tools, and showed up at dawn to begin work. He was halfway through replacing the steps when Amelia arrived, presumably to prepare lessons for the coming week. She stopped at the edge of the schoolyard and stared at him. "What are you doing?" she demanded. Benjamin stood, removing his hat respectfully. "The schoolhouse needs repairs, Miss Foster. I thought I might help." "Did I ask for your help?" "No, madam, but the building needs the work regardless." "I do not want anything from you, Mr. Wade. Not your help, not your apologies, nothing. Please leave immediately." "Miss Foster, I am truly sorry for what I said. I was wrong and stupid, and I have regretted it every single day since. Please, let me at least finish fixing the steps so the children will be safe." Her expression softened slightly at the mention of the children, but her resolve did not waver. "You can finish the steps. Then you will leave and not return." She swept past him into the schoolhouse, the door closing firmly behind her. Benjamin finished the steps, repaired the window frames, and was debating whether to risk angering her further by climbing onto the roof when the door opened again. Amelia stood in the doorway, her arms crossed. "It is noon, Mr. Wade. You have been working for 6 hours. You may go now." "I was thinking about the roof." "The roof can wait. You have done enough." He gathered his tools slowly, hoping she might say something more, might show some small sign that his efforts had made a dent in her anger. But she simply waited, silent and impassive, until he had packed everything up and mounted his mare. As he rode away, he glanced back and saw her examining the repairs he had made. Her expression was unreadable. The following week brought the first real cold snap of autumn. The aspen trees turned gold seemingly overnight, and frost covered the ground each morning. Benjamin continued working the mine, his hands growing calloused and his shoulders broad from the constant labor. He sent money back to his younger sister in Kansas, keeping only enough for room and board and his ongoing campaign to win Amelia Foster's forgiveness. His second major effort came when he learned from Mrs. Henderson, the woman Amelia had been visiting on that fateful first day, that the schoolteacher had been trying to acquire new textbooks for months. The town council had approved the purchase, but had not actually provided the funds. Benjamin made inquiries, found a book supplier in Denver, and used nearly all his savings to purchase a complete set of McGuffey readers, several arithmetic texts, and a beautiful illustrated geography book. He had them shipped to St. Elmo and arranged for them to be delivered to the schoolhouse on a Monday morning when he knew Amelia would be teaching. He watched from across the street as the delivery wagon pulled up and the driver unloaded crate after crate. Amelia came out, looking confused, and spoke with the driver. She opened one of the crates, pulled out a book, and even from a distance Benjamin could see the joy on her face. Then she found the card he had included. He watched as she read it, saw her expression change from delight to anger. She looked around, spotted him standing in the shadows near the general store, and marched across the street with the card clenched in her fist. "You bought these books," she said. "Yes, madam." "The school cannot accept gifts from you, Mr. Wade. It would be highly inappropriate." "They are not gifts to you personally, Miss Foster. They are for the children. Surely you would not let your anger at me deprive them of the education they deserve." It was a calculated move, and he saw her struggle with it. Her hand tightened on the card, crumpling it further. "You are manipulating me," she said quietly. "I am trying to make amends, however I can. This does not change what you did, what you assumed about me. I know, but maybe it is a start." She looked at him for a long moment, and for the first time since that horrible first encounter, there was something other than anger in her eyes. Confusion, perhaps, or the beginning of reluctant curiosity. "Thank you for the books," she said finally. "The children will benefit greatly from them." She turned and walked back to the schoolhouse without another word, but Benjamin felt something shift. It was not forgiveness, not by a long shot, but it was acknowledgement. It was a crack in the wall. October arrived with snow flurries and plummeting temperatures. The mine where Benjamin worked became even more dangerous as ice formed at the entrance and the tunnels grew slick with moisture. One of his fellow miners broke his leg in a cave-in, and Benjamin helped dig him out and carry him down the mountain to the doctor. Through it all, he continued his quiet campaign. He repaired the fence around the schoolyard. He chopped and stacked firewood outside the schoolhouse, enough to last through the winter. He never approached Amelia directly, never forced a conversation. He simply did things that needed doing, things that would make her life easier, and asked for nothing in return. The town noticed. People began to comment on the cowboy who had insulted their schoolteacher and was now desperately trying to make amends. Opinions were divided. Some thought he was being appropriately penitent. Others thought no amount of good deeds could erase his initial offense. Still others wondered why he was trying so hard in the first place. Benjamin wondered about that himself sometimes, late at night in his boarding house room. Yes, he wanted to make amends for his mistake. Yes, he felt guilty about hurting her. But there was something more, something that had grown over the weeks of watching her from a distance, learning about her character through the stories people told, and the evidence of her kindness he saw everywhere in town. He was falling in love with Amelia Foster. It was an inconvenient, painful, probably hopeless sort of love, but it was real nonetheless. He loved the way she laughed with the children, her face lighting up with genuine joy. He loved the dedication she showed to her work, arriving early and staying late to help students who struggled. He loved the quiet strength he saw in her, the way she commanded respect without demanding it, the way she had carved out a meaningful life for herself in this rough mountain town. And because he loved her, he could not give up trying to earn her forgiveness, even when it seemed impossible. The first snow of the season came in mid-October, a heavy wet snow that blanketed St. Elmo in white and turned the streets to mud. Benjamin was walking to the mine before dawn when he heard a commotion near the church. He changed direction and found several townspeople gathered, looking up at the church roof where a section had collapsed under the weight of the snow. Reverend Thomas was there, looking distressed. "We cannot afford repairs," he was saying. "Not with winter coming and so many families struggling." Benjamin studied the damage. It was significant but not impossible to fix if one had the right materials and the skill. He had both, having helped his father build and repair structures on their farm in Kansas. "I can fix it," he said. The Reverend looked at him with surprise. "Mr. Wade, that would be a considerable undertaking. I cannot pay you." "I am not asking for payment, but I will need help and materials." Within hours, Benjamin had organized a work crew. He donated his own money to purchase lumber and shingles, showing the men how to shore up the damaged section and rebuild the roof properly. They worked for 3 days straight, and by the end, the church roof was not only repaired but improved, stronger than it had been before. Amelia came by on the second day with food for the workers. She brought a large pot of stew and fresh bread, setting it up on a table near the church. Benjamin was on the roof, hammering shingles when he saw her arrive. She glanced up once, her eyes meeting his briefly before she turned away to serve the food. He did not come down to eat until she had left. That evening, as he was cleaning up the tools, Reverend Thomas approached him. "That was good work you did, son. The whole town is grateful." "It needed doing. Miss Foster asked me about you today. She wanted to know why you were helping, what you hoped to gain from it." Benjamin paused in his work. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that some men try to buy forgiveness, while others try to earn it through their actions. I told her that only she could determine which category you fall into." "And what did she say to that?" The Reverend smiled gently. "She said she would think about it. For Miss Foster, that is progress." November brought bitter cold and more snow. The mountain passes became treacherous, and the town settled into the isolated routine of winter. The mine where Benjamin worked reduced its operations, and he found himself with more free time. He used it to volunteer wherever help was needed, clearing snow from walkways, repairing equipment, helping families prepare for the long winter ahead. He also began attending the adult reading circle that met at the schoolhouse on Thursday evenings. Amelia led the group, which consisted of about a dozen townspeople who gathered to discuss literature and improve their reading skills. Some of the miners were barely literate, struggling through simple passages, while others were well educated and engaged in spirited debates about the meaning of various texts. Benjamin had always been a good reader, thanks to his mother's insistence on education. When he first appeared at the reading circle, Amelia had looked startled and not entirely pleased, but she could not turn him away without a reason. He took a seat in the back and participated quietly, offering his thoughts when asked, but mostly just listening. Over the weeks, he noticed that Amelia was a gifted teacher. She had a way of asking questions that made people think without making them feel stupid. She encouraged the struggling readers with genuine patience and challenged the advanced students with complex texts. She created an atmosphere where learning felt safe and enjoyable. One evening, they were discussing a passage from Nathaniel Hawthorne, and a debate arose about the nature of sin and redemption. One of the minors argued that some sins were too great to be forgiven, that certain actions marked a person forever. Amelia listened to this argument, then shook her head. "I do not believe that," she said quietly. "I believe that people can make terrible mistakes and still be worthy of redemption. But redemption requires genuine remorse, meaningful change, and time. You cannot simply apologize and expect everything to be forgotten. You have to prove, through consistent action over a sustained period, that you understand what you did wrong and that you have become a better person because of it." Her eyes flickered to Benjamin as she said this, just for a moment, but he caught it. His heart began to beat faster. After the reading circle ended that night, as people were bundling up in their coats and preparing to brave the cold, Benjamin approached Amelia. She was tidying the books, stacking them carefully on her desk. "Miss Foster, might I walk you home? It is very cold and the streets are icy." She paused, considering. He could see her weighing the request, measuring it against her anger and her pride. "Very well," she said finally. "But only because it is indeed very cold." They walked in silence for the first few minutes, their boots crunching in the snow. The night was clear, and the stars blazed overhead with an intensity only possible at high altitude. Their breath formed white clouds in the frigid air. "I have been observing your actions over the past few months," Amelia said eventually, her voice carefully neutral. "You have been very helpful to the community. I am trying to be the kind of man I should have been from the beginning. Are you doing these things to impress me, Mr. Wade? Or because you genuinely care about the people of this town?" It was a fair question, and it deserved an honest answer. Benjamin thought about it as they walked, their footsteps the only sound on the empty street. "Both," he said finally. "I started because I wanted to make amends to you. But somewhere along the way, I came to care about St. Elmo and its people. I have lived in a lot of places, Miss Foster, and I have never stayed anywhere longer than a few months. But this town feels different. It feels like somewhere I could build a real life." They had reached the boarding house. Amelia stopped at the bottom of the steps and turned to face him. The porch light illuminated her face, and Benjamin saw that her expression had softened considerably. "What you said to me that first day hurt me very deeply," she said quietly. "Not just because it was insulting, but because it revealed what you assumed about women like me. That a woman on her own, doing work in a rough place, must be selling herself rather than providing a legitimate service. That assumption is what makes it so hard for women to be taken seriously in the world, Mr. Wade. It is why we have to fight twice as hard for half the respect." "I understand that now," Benjamin said. "I was ignorant and thoughtless, and I am truly sorry. Not just for what I said, but for the thinking behind it. You have taught me to be better, Miss Foster, even though you never intended to teach me anything." A small smile played at the corner of her mouth. "I seem to be always teaching, whether I intend to or not. It is a gift you have." They stood there for a moment, the cold forgotten, something fragile and new forming between them. "Good night, Mr. Wade," Amelia said softly. "Good night, Miss Foster." He watched her climb the steps and enter the boarding house, then walked back to his own lodgings with his heart feeling lighter than it had in months. December arrived with a blizzard that shut down the town for 3 days. When the snow finally stopped, Benjamin joined the crews digging out the main street and ensuring that every household had access to food and fuel. He worked until his hands were numb and his back ached, and when he finally returned to his room, he found a note that had been slipped under his door. It was from Amelia, written in her neat teacher's hand. "Mr. Wade, I would be grateful if you could help me move some supplies to the schoolhouse when the weather permits. There are several heavy items I need to relocate. If you are willing, please come by on Saturday morning. A." Foster Benjamin read the note 3 times, analyzing every word for hidden meaning. She had asked him for help, specifically asked him. It was not exactly forgiveness, but it was something. Saturday morning found him at the boarding house promptly at 8, freshly shaved and wearing his cleanest clothes. Amelia answered the door herself, bundled in a heavy wool coat with a scarf wrapped around her neck. "Good morning, Mr. Wade. Thank you for coming." "It is my pleasure, Miss Foster. What needs moving?" She led him to a storage room where several crates of supplies were stacked. Books, papers, art supplies, and various materials for school projects. Together, they loaded everything onto a borrowed wagon and made several trips to the schoolhouse. As they worked, they talked, cautiously at first and then with increasing ease. She told him about growing up in Boston, about her father who had been a professor and her mother who had been a passionate advocate for women's education. She spoke about the grief of losing them both and the decision to come west, to start fresh in a place where she could make a real difference. He told her about his family's farm in Kansas, about his father who had died when Benjamin was 16, forcing him to become the man of the house before he was ready. He spoke about his restlessness, the feeling that he needed to move to see new places to escape the weight of responsibility and expectation. "And now," she asked as they unloaded the last crate, "do you still feel that restlessness?" "Not as much," he admitted. "I think maybe I was not running towards something but away from it. The fear of settling down, of putting roots in the ground and becoming trapped. But I am learning that roots do not trap you. They anchor you. They give you a foundation to grow from." Amelia looked at him with an expression he could not quite read. "That is very wise, Mr. Wade. Please," he said impulsively, "would you call me Benjamin, at least when it is just us talking?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Very well, Benjamin, and you may call me Amelia if you like. Though not in front of the children or other townspeople. It would not be proper." "Of course. Thank you, Amelia." Her name felt like honey on his tongue. They finished unloading the supplies and stood in the schoolhouse, surrounded by the evidence of her dedication to her students. She had decorated the walls with maps and charts, student artwork, and inspirational quotes. There was a small wood stove in the corner, and she moved to light it, warming the room against the December chill. "Would you like some coffee?" she offered. "I keep a pot here for late evenings when I am working on lessons." "I would like that very much." They sat at her desk, drinking coffee from chipped mugs, and talked for over an hour. It was the longest conversation they had ever had, and Benjamin savored every moment of it. She was even more remarkable than he had imagined, intelligent and passionate, and fiercely committed to her ideals. She made him laugh with stories about her students, made him think with her questions about justice and society, made him want to be a better man simply by being in her presence. When he finally left, trudging through the snow back to his boarding house, he felt like he was walking on air despite the cold and the long day of physical labor. Something had shifted between them. Some fundamental barrier had begun to crumble. Christmas came to St. Elmo with all the small-town charm that such places could muster. The church held a special service, and the schoolchildren performed a nativity play that Amelia had spent weeks rehearsing with them. Benjamin attended, sitting in the back, and felt his heart swell with pride when the performance went off without a major mishap. He had agonized over whether to give Amelia a Christmas gift. It had to be something appropriate, not too personal or expensive, something that showed respect and thoughtfulness. He finally settled on a beautiful leather-bound journal with blank pages, and a package of quality pens. Teachers always needed such things, and it could not be construed as an inappropriate gift. He left it at the boarding house for her on Christmas Eve, wrapped in simple brown paper with a card that read, "For recording the wisdom you share with others. Merry Christmas, Benjamin Wade." On Christmas morning, he went to church and found a small package waiting for him on his seat. Inside was a hand-knitted scarf in deep blue wool, along with a card in Amelia's handwriting, "For keeping warm during the cold mountain winter. Thank you for all your kindness to our community. Merry Christmas, Amelia Foster." He wore the scarf every day after that, treasuring it not just for its warmth but for what it represented. January of 1884 brought temperatures that regularly dropped below zero and snow that piled up to the roofs of buildings. The town was effectively cut off from the outside world, and the residents banded together to survive the harsh conditions. Benjamin worked on various repair projects around town, always seeming to be wherever he was needed. He and Amelia had fallen into a comfortable pattern. They spoke after the Thursday reading circles, sometimes walking together if the weather permitted, sometimes just talking in the schoolhouse over coffee. She had not forgiven him, not officially, but the sharp edges of her anger had worn smooth. They had become something like friends, though Benjamin wanted more and suspected she knew it. One particularly brutal evening in late January, a fire broke out in one of the miners' cabins. Benjamin was among the first to respond, helping to form a bucket brigade from the nearby creek. The fire was brought under control before it could spread, but the cabin was destroyed, and the family who lived there lost everything. The community rallied immediately. The family was housed temporarily in the church, and people donated clothes, food, and supplies. Amelia organized the relief effort with military precision, making lists and coordinating volunteers. Benjamin worked alongside her, and when she collapsed into a chair near midnight, exhausted from the long day, he brought her a cup of tea and sat beside her. "You did a remarkable thing today," he said quietly. "That family would have been lost without your leadership. We all did what needed to be done. This is what community means. You make it happen, though. You are the heart of this town, Amelia. People look to you for guidance and strength." She turned to look at him, her green eyes searching his face. "Why do you say such things to me? Because they are true? Or because you want me to forgive you? I hope for your forgiveness every day, but that does not make what I said any less true." She was quiet for a long moment, her tea cooling in her hands. "I have been thinking about what you did wrong, Benjamin. That first day, I have thought about it quite a lot, actually." His heart began to pound. "And what have you concluded?" "That you made a terrible assumption based on limited information and your own biases. That you hurt me with your carelessness. But also, that you have spent months trying to understand why it was wrong and trying to become a better person. I have watched you help this town in 100 different ways, asking for nothing in return. I have seen you show respect to everyone, regardless of their station. I have observed genuine change in you. Does that mean you are ready to forgive me? I am ready to consider it." Which is more than I ever thought I would say. It was not quite forgiveness, but it was close. Benjamin felt like he could breathe properly for the first time in months. February brought a brief warming spell, and the town emerged from its winter cocoon like a bear stretching after hibernation. The reading circle decided to do a special presentation, with members reading from their favorite works and explaining why those passages moved them. When it was Benjamin's turn, he read a passage from Ralph Waldo Emerson about self-reliance and personal growth. "I read this years ago," he told the group, "and I thought I understood it. I thought it meant never depending on others, always being strong and independent. But I have learned that real strength is not about isolation. It is about being part of a community, about admitting when you are wrong and working to be better. It is about allowing yourself to care about people and places, even when that makes you vulnerable. He looked at Amelia as he said this, and she looked back at him with an expression that made his breath catch. After the reading circle, as he walked her home through the slushy streets, she slipped her hand through his arm. It was the first time she had voluntarily touched him, and the contact sent electricity through his body. "That was beautifully said tonight," she told him. "Your reading. I meant every word. I know you did. That is what made it beautiful." They walked in companionable silence for a while, the night air less brutal than it had been in weeks. Spring was still months away, but there was a promise of it in the air. "Benjamin," she said as they neared her boarding house, "I have something to tell you." His stomach clenched with nervousness. "Yes, I forgive you. For what you said that first day, for the assumption you made, for all of it, I forgive you." The relief that washed over him was so intense it was almost painful. "Thank you, Amelia. You cannot know what that means to me." "I think I can. You have worked very hard for it. I would have worked twice as hard if necessary." She smiled up at him, her face lovely in the lamplight. "I believe you would have. That is why I can forgive you, not because of the things you did, though those helped, but because I can see that you truly understand what you did wrong and why it mattered. That is worth more than any gesture or gift." They stood at the bottom of her boarding house steps, neither wanting to move to break the spell of the moment. "May I court you?" Benjamin asked suddenly, the words tumbling out before he could second-guess them. "Properly, I mean, with full knowledge of the town and your permission and all the right intentions." Amelia laughed, a sound like music. "You want to court me?" "I have wanted to court you since about the second week I was here, when I watched you help a struggling student sound out a difficult word. And you were so patient and kind that I thought my heart would break. I have wanted you to know how I feel, but I could not say anything while you were still angry. I would not have been fair to put that burden on you. And now I am asking with all the hope in my heart if you would allow me the honor of courting you. If the answer is no, I will accept it and be grateful for your friendship. But I had to ask." She reached up and touched his face gently, her fingers cold against his cheek. "The answer is yes, Benjamin Wade. You may court me, properly and with full knowledge of the town, as you said." He wanted to kiss her, wanted it more than he had ever wanted anything, but he knew it was too soon. Instead, he took her hand and raised it to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "You have made me the happiest man in Colorado," he said. "Good. You have earned a bit of happiness, I think." He walked back to his boarding house feeling like he could conquer the world. News of their courtship spread through St. Elmo like wildfire. The general consensus seemed to be approval, though there were some who still thought Amelia was being too forgiving too quickly. Benjamin did not care. He had her permission to court her, and he intended to do it right. He called on her every Sunday afternoon, bringing small gifts that were appropriate and thoughtful. A book of poetry, a beautiful handkerchief, sweets from the general store. They took walks when the weather allowed, always properly chaperoned by Mrs. Kowalski or another matron. They attended church together, sitting side by side in the pew. They had dinner at the boarding house with the other residents, making conversation and learning each other's habits and preferences. Benjamin discovered that Amelia loved music, but could not carry a tune to save her life. That she had a wicked sense of humor that emerged when she was comfortable. That she was fiercely loyal to the people she cared about and would defend them against any threat. That she sometimes doubted herself late at night, worried that she was not doing enough for her students, not making enough of a difference. Amelia learned that Benjamin had a gift for woodworking, and often whittled small animals to relax. That he wrote letters to his sister every week without fail. That he had a deep love of the natural world and could identify dozens of bird species by their calls alone. That beneath his rough exterior was a thoughtful, sensitive soul who had been shaped by loss and responsibility into someone stronger than he realized. March arrived with the promise of spring. The snow began to melt in earnest, creating rivers of muck that made the streets nearly impassable. Benjamin helped organize crews to lay down boards and gravel, creating walkways that allowed people to navigate without sinking to their knees in mud. On a particularly fine afternoon, he and Amelia took a walk up into the foothills, accompanied by Mrs. Kowalski, who stayed a respectful distance behind them. The aspen trees were beginning to bud, and the first wildflowers were pushing up through the melting snow. They found a spot with a view of the valley below. St. Elmo nestled in its mountain cradle, smoke rising from chimneys, and the sounds of the town carrying faintly on the wind. "I love it here," Amelia said, hugging herself against the cool breeze. "When I first came, I thought I would stay maybe a year and then move on to somewhere more civilized, but this place has gotten into my blood." "I know the feeling," Benjamin said. "I have been a drifter for most of my adult life, but St. Elmo feels like home in a way nowhere else ever has." "What will you do when the mine plays out? Most of them do eventually." "I have been thinking about that. I have some money saved and I am good with my hands. I thought maybe I could start a carpentry business." There is always need for someone who can build and repair things, especially in a growing town. "That sounds like a wonderful idea." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. Mrs. Kowalski was examining some flowers a discreet distance away, pretending not to watch them. "Amelia, these past months with you have been the best of my life. I know we have not been courting long, not in the traditional sense, but I have been in love with you for far longer than that. I love your strength and your kindness, your intelligence and your passion. I love the way you see the best in people and the way you fight for what you believe in. I love everything about you." Her eyes had gone wide, her cheeks flushed with more than just the cold air. "I know I started poorly," he continued. "I know I hurt you and had to earn my way back into your good graces. But I promise you, Amelia, if you will have me, I will spend the rest of my life being worthy of you. I will build us a home and a life here in St. Elmo. I will support your work and cherish you always. Will you marry me?" For a moment she said nothing, and Benjamin's heart stopped. Then tears began to stream down her face and she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Benjamin, I will marry you." He pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and finally he kissed her. It was gentle and sweet and perfect, the culmination of months of hope and effort and love. Mrs. Kowalski cleared her throat loudly. "I believe congratulations are in order, but we should be heading back before the sun gets too low. Mountain weather is treacherous." They walked back to town hand in hand, making plans and dreaming out loud. They would marry in June, they decided, when the wildflowers were in full bloom and the weather was warm. It would be a simple ceremony in the church, with the whole town invited. They would build a house on a plot of land just outside town that Benjamin had his eye on, with a view of the mountains and room for a garden. The engagement announcement caused a sensation in St. Elmo. Some people were thrilled, having watched the romance develop over the months. Others were skeptical, wondering if Benjamin had truly changed or if this was all an elaborate act. But most people were simply happy for their beloved schoolteacher, who had sacrificed so much to serve their community and deserved happiness. Benjamin threw himself into preparations. He filed a claim on the land he wanted, hired a surveyor to mark the boundaries, and began drawing up plans for their house. It would be modest but well built, with large windows to let in light, a proper kitchen for Amelia, and a study where she could work on her lessons. He spent every spare moment cutting timber, preparing materials, and laying the foundation. The town rallied to help. Men from the mine donated their labor on Sundays, helping to raise the frame of the house. The women organized a quilting bee to make linens for the new home. Children brought wildflowers and drawings to decorate the construction site. It became a community project, a symbol of the town's affection for both Benjamin and Amelia. April brought warmer weather, and the house began to take shape. Benjamin worked from dawn to dusk, driven by his love for Amelia and his determination to provide her with a proper home. She visited the site often, bringing him lunch and offering suggestions for the layout. They argued playfully about where to put the stove and how large the windows should be, both of them delighting in the domesticity of planning their future together. One evening, as they sat on what would eventually be their front porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of pink and gold, Amelia leaned her head on Benjamin's shoulder. "You ever think about that first day?" she asked. "About how differently things could have gone?" "All the time. If you had been even slightly less angry, if I had been even slightly less determined to make amends, we might never have ended up here. I was so furious with you. I had never been so insulted in my entire life. You had every right to be. I was an idiot." She laughed softly. "You were. But you were also willing to change, to grow. That is what made all the difference. So many men would have just written me off as an angry woman and moved on. But you stayed. You tried. Because you were worth trying for, because even in your anger I could see who you really were. And I wanted to be worthy of knowing that person." She lifted her head to look at him, her eyes shining. "You are worthy, Benjamin. You have been for a long time now. I am so glad I gave you the chance to prove it." They kissed as the sun sank below the horizon. The future stretched out before them like the endless Colorado sky. May brought the house to completion. It was not a grand mansion, but it was solid and beautiful in its simplicity. Benjamin had carved their initials into the lintel above the door, along with the date, May 15, 1884. Amelia cried when she saw it, overcome with emotion at the realization that this was their home, the place where they would build their life together. The wedding was planned for June 10th. Amelia had written to her aunt in Boston, who sent a beautiful white dress that had belonged to Amelia's mother. Benjamin purchased a new suit from the general store, dark blue with a vest that Amelia had helped him select. Reverend Thomas agreed to perform the ceremony, and Mrs. Kowalski organized the reception with military efficiency. The night before the wedding, Benjamin lay awake in his boarding house room, thinking about the journey that had brought him to this moment. A year ago, he had been a drifter with no roots and no purpose beyond the next job, the next town. He had made a terrible mistake, insulted a woman who deserved nothing but respect, and had to fight his way back from that error. But in fighting for Amelia's forgiveness, he had discovered something profound. He had learned that love was not just a feeling but a choice, made over and over again in small actions and big gestures. He had learned that community was not a trap, but a gift, that putting down roots allowed you to grow in ways that constant motion never could. He had learned that being vulnerable, admitting mistakes and working to fix them, was not weakness but the truest form of strength. Tomorrow, he would marry the most remarkable woman he had ever met. They would build a life together in this small mountain town, surrounded by people they cared about and who cared for them. It was not the life he had imagined for himself a year ago, but it was infinitely better than anything he could have dreamed. The morning of June 10th, 1884 dawned clear and perfect. The wildflowers were in full bloom, carpeting the meadows in purple and yellow and white. The church had been decorated with fresh flowers and ribbons, and nearly every resident of St. Elmo was in attendance. Benjamin stood at the front of the church, his heart pounding as the music began. And then Amelia appeared in the doorway, beautiful beyond words in her mother's white dress, carrying a bouquet of wildflowers. She walked down the aisle on the arm of Mayor Patterson, who was giving her away in the absence of her father, and her eyes never left Benjamin's face. When she reached him, he took her hands and whispered, "You are beautiful." "You are not so bad yourself," she whispered back, her eyes dancing with joy. Reverend Thomas performed the ceremony, speaking about love and forgiveness, about second chances and the grace that allows people to grow and change. He talked about the journey that Benjamin and Amelia had taken to reach this moment, how their path had not been easy but had been worth every step. When it came time for the vows, Benjamin spoke from his heart. "Amelia, I promise to love you every day in big ways and small. I promise to support your dreams and to build our dreams together. I promise to always tell you the truth, to admit when I am wrong, and to work to be better. I promise to be your partner, your friend, and your love for all the days of my life." Amelia's voice was steady and clear as she made her promises. "Benjamin, I promise to love you with patience and kindness, to see the best in you even when times are hard. I promise to build a home with you that is filled with laughter and learning. I promise to stand beside you, to challenge you, and to support you. I promise to choose you every day for all the days of our lives." They exchanged simple gold bands, and when Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss they shared was tender and full of promise. The reception was held in the town square, with tables groaning under the weight of food that the townspeople had contributed. There was music and dancing, laughter and toasts. Benjamin danced with his new wife under the stars, her head resting against his chest, and felt like the luckiest man alive. As the evening wore on, and the celebration continued, Amelia and Benjamin slipped away to their new home. Benjamin carried her over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down gently in the front room. "Welcome home, Mrs. Wade," he said. "It has a nice sound to it," she replied, looking around at the home they had built together. "Mrs. Amelia Wade." They stood in the center of their front room, holding each other, looking forward to the future they would create together. The first year of their marriage was filled with the small joys and adjustments that all newlyweds experience. Amelia continued teaching, now walking to the schoolhouse from their home each morning. Benjamin established his carpentry business, quickly gaining a reputation for quality work and fair prices. They fell into comfortable routines, eating breakfast together before going their separate ways, reuniting for dinner each evening to share the events of their day. They also faced challenges. The winter of 1884 was even harsher than the previous one, and they struggled to keep their house warm. Benjamin's business was slow during those cold months, and money was tight. But they faced each difficulty together, their love deepening with each obstacle they overcame. In the spring of 1885, Amelia discovered she was expecting their first child. The news filled them both with joy and terror in equal measure. They prepared carefully, Benjamin building a cradle from cherry wood and Amelia sewing tiny clothes and blankets. The women of the town rallied around her, offering advice and support. Their son was born in October of 1885, a healthy boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes. They named him Thomas, after the reverend who had married them and who had become a dear friend. Benjamin held his son for the first time and wept, overwhelmed by the love he felt for this tiny person and the woman who had brought him into the world. Amelia took a few months away from teaching to care for Thomas, but she was eager to return to her work. They hired a young woman to help with childcare, and Amelia went back to the schoolhouse, now balancing her roles as teacher, wife, and mother with characteristic grace and determination. As Thomas grew, the Wade household became known for its warmth and hospitality. They hosted dinners for friends, opened their home to travelers passing through town, and became pillars of the St. Elmo community. Benjamin served on the town council, using his skills to help plan improvements and manage the growth that came with new silver strikes. Amelia expanded the school, bringing in additional teachers as the student population grew. In 1887, their daughter was born. They named her Caroline, and she had her mother's quick mind and her father's gentle nature. Thomas, now a toddler, was initially jealous of the new baby but quickly became her fiercely protective older brother. The years passed in a blur of work and family, of challenges met and joys celebrated. The silver boom that had brought so many people to St. Elmo eventually slowed, but the town had diversified enough to survive. Benjamin's carpentry business thrived, and he took on apprentices, passing on his skills to younger men. Amelia's school became known throughout the region for its excellence, and former students returned to thank her for the foundation she had given them. In the summer of 1890, when Thomas was nearly 5 and Caroline was 3, the family took a trip to Denver. It was their first real vacation, and they spent a week exploring the growing city. One evening, as they walked through a park, Benjamin and Amelia watching their children play, Amelia turned to her husband. "You remember that first day?" she asked, a question she had asked many times over the years. "Every detail," Benjamin replied, taking her hand. "I remember thinking you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, and then feeling like the biggest fool in the world when I realized my mistake." "I wanted to murder you," Amelia said with a laugh. "I was so angry I could barely see straight. You had every right to be. I shudder to think how differently my life would have turned out if you had never forgiven me. But I did forgive you, and you know why. Why? Because you showed me who you really were. Not through words, but through actions. Through months of consistent, patient effort to be better. That is what love really is, Benjamin. Not the grand gestures or the romantic declarations, though those are nice too. But the daily choice to be kind, to be understanding, to put the other person's needs alongside your own." Benjamin pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "You made me a better man, Amelia. You and this life we have built together." "We made each other better," she corrected. "That is what love does." They called the children over, and as a family they walked through the park as the sun set, talking and laughing and planning for the future. The 1890s brought more changes to St. Elmo and the Wade family. The town continued to evolve, transitioning from a rough mining camp to an established community. Benjamin was elected mayor in 1892, a position he held for 6 years. He used his influence to push for improvements in infrastructure, education, and public safety. Under his leadership, the town got a proper water system, better roads, and a volunteer fire department. Amelia continued to shape young minds, her former students going on to become teachers, doctors, lawyers, and business owners. She never forgot a student, keeping track of their progress and celebrating their successes as if they were her own children. In 1893, they welcomed another son, whom they named James. He completed their family, and the Wade household was filled with noise and laughter and love. Benjamin built an addition onto the house to accommodate their growing family, and Amelia planted a garden that became the envy of the town. As the century drew to a close, Benjamin and Amelia often reflected on the improbable journey that had brought them together. What had started with a terrible mistake and deep offense had transformed into a love story that inspired everyone who knew them. They had shown that forgiveness was possible, that people could change, and that love built on mutual respect and genuine admiration could weather any storm. In the summer of 1900, St. Elmo threw a celebration for Benjamin and Amelia's 16th wedding anniversary. The entire town turned out, testament to the impact they had made on the community. Speeches were given, toasts were made, and stories were shared about the couple who had become synonymous with the town itself. When it was Benjamin's turn to speak, he stood with Amelia by his side, their 3 children watching from the front row, and addressed the crowd. 16 years ago, I rode into this town a stranger, tired and thoughtless. I made a terrible mistake that hurt a remarkable woman. I thought I was beyond redemption, that some errors are too great to be forgiven. But Amelia taught me that forgiveness is not about forgetting or excusing, but about allowing space for growth and change. She made me work for it, made me prove that I understood what I had done wrong and that I was committed to being better. And in the process of earning her forgiveness, I found my home, my purpose, and my heart. He turned to Amelia, taking her hands. You are my greatest blessing, Amelia Wade. You and our children and this life we have built together. Thank you for giving me a second chance. Thank you for seeing who I could be, even when I was showing you who I was at my worst. I love you more today than I did the day we married, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. Amelia wiped tears from her eyes. You made it impossible not to forgive you, Benjamin. You showed up every day, ready to do the work, asking for nothing but the opportunity to prove yourself. You taught me that love is not about perfection but about persistence, about choosing each other over and over, even when it is hard, especially when it is hard. I love you with my whole heart. They kissed to thunderous applause, their children cheering along with everyone else. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new adventures and challenges. Thomas grew into a serious young man who followed his mother into teaching. Caroline became a gifted artist whose paintings captured the beauty of the Colorado mountains. James, the youngest, inherited his father's skill with his hands and became a master carpenter. Benjamin and Amelia grew older together, their hair graying and their faces lining, but their love never diminishing. They took daily walks together, hand in hand, through the town they had helped build. They sat on their porch in the evenings, watching the sunset paint the mountains in brilliant colors, and counted their blessings. In 1905, their first grandchild was born to Thomas and his wife Sarah. Benjamin held the tiny girl and marveled at the continuation of their family line, at the ripples of love and life that extended out from the choice he and Amelia had made all those years ago. What should we have her call us? Amelia asked, peering down at the sleeping baby. How about Grandma and Grandpa? Benjamin suggested with a smile. Sounds perfect. More grandchildren followed as their children married and started families of their own. The Wade house became the gathering place for holidays and celebrations, filled with the sounds of children playing and families laughing together. On their 25th wedding anniversary in 1909, Benjamin took Amelia back to the spot in the foothills where he had proposed. It took them longer to make the climb than it had years before, but the view was just as beautiful. St. Elmo spread out below them, larger and more prosperous than it had been, but still recognizably the same town where they had fallen in love. You have any regrets? Amelia asked, leaning against him. Not a single one. Well, except for that first day, I will always regret making you feel the way I did. Even that led us here, Amelia said gently. I have learned that life is not about avoiding mistakes, but about how we respond to them. You responded with humility and determination. You changed yourself fundamentally because you wanted to be worthy of forgiveness. That is what I will remember, not the initial offense. You are too kind to me. I am exactly as kind to you as you deserve, which is very kind indeed. They sat together on that mountainside, two people who had built a remarkable life from unpromising beginnings, and watched the sun set on another perfect day. The years of the 1910s brought change to America and to St. Elmo. The automobile arrived, replacing horses and wagons. Electricity came to the town, though Benjamin and Amelia were among the last to have their home wired, preferring the familiar glow of oil lamps. The world beyond their mountain valley seemed to be speeding up, but in St. Elmo, life maintained its steady rhythm. Amelia retired from teaching in 1912, after 30 years in the classroom. The town threw her a retirement party that lasted an entire weekend, with former students coming from as far away as California to honor the woman who had shaped their lives. She was given a leather-bound book filled with letters and memories from the hundreds of students she had taught over the decades. Benjamin continued working, though he had slowed considerably. He no longer took on the large construction projects, but he still made furniture and did small repairs. He loved the work, the feel of wood beneath his hands, the satisfaction of creating something useful and beautiful. In 1914, their 50th grandchild was born. The family had grown so large that they could no longer all fit in the Wade house at once, but they tried anyway, cramming into every room for a chaotic and joyful celebration. 50 grandchildren, Amelia marveled as she and Benjamin sat in their usual spot on the porch that evening. "We have quite a legacy, Benjamin Wade." "We do indeed, Amelia Wade, and it all started because I was stupid enough to mistake you for a saloon girl." She laughed, the sound still bright and youthful despite her years. "And I was stubborn enough to make you earn my forgiveness." "Best decision you ever made." "Second best," she corrected. "The best decision was saying yes when you proposed." He kissed her gently, tenderly, with all the love of 50 years together. "I love you, Amelia." "I love you too, Benjamin, always and forever." They sat together as twilight settled over the mountains. Two souls who had found each other against all odds and had built a love that would endure long after they were gone. Their children and grandchildren carried their legacy forward, living lives shaped by the example of forgiveness, dedication, and true love that Benjamin and Amelia had set. St. Elmo continued to thrive, a testament to the community that people like the Wades had built. The school that Amelia had dedicated her life to still stood, now educating the great-grandchildren of her original students. The houses and businesses that Benjamin had built with his own hands still served the town, solid and enduring. On a clear June morning in 1920, Benjamin and Amelia celebrated their 66th wedding anniversary surrounded by more than 100 descendants. Children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren filled their yard, spilling out into the street. There was music and food and laughter, the sound of a family that loved each other and knew the value of the bonds that held them together. As the sun began to set and people began to head home, Benjamin and Amelia found themselves alone on their porch once more. The mountains glowed in the fading light, eternal and unchanging, bearing witness to the love story that had unfolded in their shadow. 66 years, Benjamin said softly. "I never imagined, that day I rode into town, that I would find this. You, our children, this whole beautiful life. I never imagined that the arrogant cowboy who insulted me would become the love of my life," Amelia replied. "But here we are. Here we are indeed." They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. They had lived long, full lives, filled with purpose and meaning and love. They had raised children who became good people, had served their community with dedication, and had shown everyone who knew them what true love looked like. No regrets. Amelia asked, echoing the question she had asked so many times over the years. Not a single one, Benjamin replied, giving the same answer he always gave. You. Only that we cannot live it all over again, she said with a smile, though I suppose once is enough for any lifetime. More than enough. It has been perfect, Amelia. Every moment with you has been perfect. Even that first day, especially that first day, he said firmly. Because without it, we might never have found each other. My mistake led me to you, and you led me to everything that matters. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat together as the night deepened around them, two hearts beating as one, a love story that had begun with offense and forgiveness, and had grown into something beautiful beyond measure. In the years that followed, Benjamin and Amelia continued to be fixtures in St. Elmo, beloved elders whose wisdom and experience were sought after by younger generations. They told their story often, about the terrible first impression and the month of earning forgiveness, about the love that grew from unpromising beginnings. And always, they emphasized the lessons they had learned, that mistakes can be redeemed through genuine effort, that forgiveness is a gift but must be earned, and that true love is built on respect, patience, and the daily choice to see the best in each other. Their story became part of St. Elmo's folklore, told and retold, a reminder that even the worst beginnings can lead to the happiest endings if people are willing to do the work. And when, many years later, Benjamin and Amelia Wade finally passed from this world within days of each other, as couples married for decades sometimes do, the entire town mourned the loss of two people who had shaped not just a community but countless individual lives. The house that Benjamin built with his own hands stood for many more decades, a landmark in St. Elmo, before finally being converted into a museum celebrating the town's history. And always, the story of the cowboy who mistook the schoolteacher for a saloon girl and spent a month earning her forgiveness before winning her heart, was told as one of the great love stories of the Old West. It was a story about mistakes and redemption, about pride and humility, about the transformative power of genuine love. It was a story that reminded people that we are not defined by our worst moments, but by how we respond to them, how we grow and change and become better versions of ourselves. And it all began on a dusty street in St. Elmo, Colorado, in August of 1883, when Benjamin Wade tipped his hat wrong, and Amelia Foster showed him that some things are worth fighting for, worth changing for, worth dedicating your whole life to earning and keeping. Their love story endured long after they were gone, an inspiration to anyone who had ever made a terrible mistake and wondered if they could be forgiven, to anyone who had been wronged and wondered if they could let go of their anger, to anyone who believed in the possibility of transformation and the power of choosing love over hurt. In the end, the story of Benjamin and Amelia Wade was not about a mistake or even about forgiveness. It was about two people who found each other, recognized something precious and worth preserving, and spent the rest of their lives proving that love, real love, the kind that lasts, is not found but built. Built with patience and persistence, with humility and hope, with the courage to be vulnerable and the strength to forgive. And it all started because a tired cowboy made a terrible assumption, and a fierce schoolteacher made him work for a month to earn her forgiveness. From that unpromising beginning grew a love that would be remembered long after both of them were gone, a testament to the truth that the best stories often begin with the worst mistakes, And the greatest loves are the ones we have to fight for. Their legacy lived on in their children and grandchildren, in the students Amelia had taught, and the buildings Benjamin had built, in the community they had nurtured, and the love they had shared. And on quiet evenings, when the sun set over the Colorado mountains and the stars emerged in the vast western sky, the people of St. Elmo would remember the Wades and smile, knowing that true love, the kind that changes everything, is always worth the wait, worth the work, worth every moment of the journey. The end.